Oh, okay. All right, you can certainly bring her in. Expert witnesses are traditionally allowed to be in during the course of fact testimony.
If I can just raise one more question.
Yes, sir.
Judge, we have a potential impeachment witness, David Wayne Johnson. My understanding is my secretary made arrangements for him to be brought over too. We may not wind up needing him, but is he here? Yeah, if you can have him brought down, again, it's for impeachment purposes, so I may not be calling him, but I need him here just in case, otherwise we're going to have to delay things. David Wayne Johnson, he was on yesterday's list. He's one of my other clients.
One of your clients, Mr. Williams?
Yes, Judge, since he's testifying for the defense, I called the bar ethics hotline, had this come up in a case before, and the bar had no issue with it. I'm supposed to get permission from my boss before I withdraw, but certainly if the court thinks that there's an issue.
I'm not saying there is an issue, but I'm not sure if that's something that you've brought up with both of your clients, basically.
I have, Judge.
Okay.
I have, and I've advised him that if he ever feels that he's put on the spot or feels uncomfortable, that we'll withdraw and get him another lawyer.
And when you say he, you mean Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Norris is aware of the situation as well, and you don't have any objection to my continuing to represent Mr. Johnson, do you?
No, sir.
Okay. Let me just, if you could take your seat. When you stand up at this particular angle, Mr. Williams, I really can't see Mr. Norris. Mr. Norris, can I get you to raise your right hand real quick to be sworn in? Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give here today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir. So help me God.
Okay. And then you heard what Mr. Williams just said about he's currently representing David Wayne Johnson, who is apparently an impeachment witness that's been discussed. Do you have any concerns with him representing both of you at this time?
No, sir.
Okay. Have you had a chance to speak with Mr. Williams about this issue?
Yes, sir.
And you don't think there's any sort of conflict of interest that's arisen because of this?
No, sir.
Are you willing to waive any conflict of interest if there is one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Obviously, again, as Mr. Williams just said, if there's any concern going forward, just bring that back to my attention, or you can certainly bring it to Mr. Williams' attention so he can do so. I just want to make sure that you feel comfortable with how things are going before we really get going on the proceedings here. All right. Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
All right. All right, so we're here on defense motion entitled Motion to Determine Immunity and Dismiss, which was filed on October 2nd, 2024. It's docket line 184. I have reviewed the motion. I've also reviewed the response that was filed by the state on January 2nd of 2025, which in addition to approximately 10 pages or so of the response, there was also some transcripts that were attached. I've also reviewed those. I believe there's another exhibit that was a quick claim deed or something to that effect. So I'm familiar with both parties' pleadings in this case. How would you like to proceed, Mr. Williams?
Judge, my understanding is that it's our burden to put on a prima facie case, and I'll call Mr. Norris to the stand for that purpose. Okay. And then the court will rule on whether or not I presented a prima facie case and whether the burden then shifts to the state to prove by clear and convincing evidence that Mr. Norris is not entitled to the protection of the stand your ground statute.
Okay. Any issues with that from the state side, Ms. Sandler?
Your Honor, just for the record, I believe he does need to raise a prima facie case in his motion. The state's argument is that he does not.
Okay. Okay.
Judge, obviously my position is that.
So their position is saying you should have put more in your motion as far as actual evidence. Is that what I'm gathering?
That's correct, Your Honor. He must raise a prima facie case in his motion to even get a hearing assertions of fear.
Okay.
which I put sufficient allegations in the motion. If the court is inclined not to allow the hearing to go forward today, then I'd ask for leave to amend the motion.
Okay.
Provide copies of the injunction paperwork, copies of the depositions, the videos.
All right. My understanding, again, as I've mentioned, this motion was filed back in early October, so approximately 3 months ago.
Yes, sir.
It wasn't set until I took over the division. I understand why that was. I reviewed the court date you had with the previous judge in the case and talked about setting it all at one instance. But now we're here 3 months later and we're trying to say we shouldn't have a hearing. I'm not saying the state's wrong in saying that, but I also don't want to delay this case anymore. This has been 3 years that the case has been pending. I'd like to get some sort of resolution without just pushing it out again. I'm going to allow him to put on his case here today. Certainly your objection to that is noted for the record, Ms. Sandler. But I think him refiling the motion just for us to come back again is only going to delay things even more. So I'd like to have it heard today if that's not a problem.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, and it's also my understanding that in such a case that Mr. Norris can testify and that cannot be used against him in any potential trial. Is that
Well,
right?
Your Honor, the case law is that it can be used against
Okay.
him in
Can you provide me with that particular case law if you've got it, Ms. Sandler? Is that only for impeachment purposes?
No, Your Honor, it's not. It can be used substantively.
Okay.
So,
And I just want to make sure I'm explaining that, or it's been explained to Mr. Norris, that if he testifies today, that's potential evidence against him if we go, if ultimately the court denies this particular motion and we go forward with a trial, that whatever he says today can be used against him in that trial. And I'll ask him some questions to that effect, Mr. Williams. I'm not trying to certainly eavesdrop what you're saying, but you did ask him if he understood that, but I'll ask him some questions as well. Mr. Williams, did you disagree with the state's assertion that it can be used against him in a substantive fashion?
Judge, frankly, I'm not certain that that's correct. I was thinking more in terms of impeachment.
Okay.
My position has been that he's more or less married to it.
Okay.
But we did discuss prior that the state would likely, I was thinking in terms of impeachment, but if the state has case law that says that it can be introduced in the case in chief, I don't anticipate his testimony to change, and I do anticipate that he'll be taking the stand in his own defense at trial.
Okay.
Obviously, that decision will be made by him at the 11th hour, but that's been my plan throughout.
And I understand that, Mr. Williams. I just want to make sure that Mr. Norris has told to him on the record that this is a possibility so that if he testifies, he knows all potential consequences of his testimony.
Your Honor, that case law is in my trial folder, not my standard ground. So I apologize if you'll give me a moment to find it.
That's fine. Again, and we've got plenty of time today.
Your Honor, it's State versus Lincoln. It is a first DCA case from February 21st of 2024, 393 Southern 3rd, 232.
Let me just take a quick look at it.
At note 2, it says, in general, a defendant's testimony at a pretrial hearing, including a self-defense immunity hearing, is admissible in evidence at later proceedings.
You have a copy of the case, Mr. Williams?
Judge, I'm pulling it up on Westlaw now.
I just wanted to make sure.
I just think I've timed out, and so I'm having to reload.
Court specifically quotes, this case does not present a reason to deviate from the general rule that a defendant's testimony is admissible against him in later proceedings.
Okay.
Anytime a defendant exercises the right to testify at a criminal trial, he risks that his testimony could be used against him at any subsequent retrial. That's citing Cruz v. State 189 Southern 3rd at 2829.
Okay. And as I'm trying to catch up back to criminal law, as y'all know, I did quite a bit of it before I took the bench, but this is my first rotation back into criminal, and things have changed quite a bit. Not only this, I think I just want to make sure, because I know the pretrial detention hearings have this rule, and I want to make sure that we're clear. And I'm telling Mr. Norris, not only has his attorney told him this, but the court's telling him this. This is not advice as to what you should or shouldn't do, Mr. Norris, but that anything that you say in your testimony today could ultimately be used against you in a trial if we were to have one after today's proceedings. Do you understand that, Mr. Norris?
Yes, sir. It's my position since day one from out the gate to tell the truth.
Okay.
I'm sorry, was that 292?
393 Southern 3rd 232.
232.
State of Florida versus Lincoln.
Excuse me.
All right, Judge, I concur. That's what it said. Citing Tarboro v. State, prior statements from a bail hearing admissible in the state's case in chief and for impeachment purposes.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Yes, sir.
All right. Anything that you want to do as far as, I'm not going to say an opening statement, but any preliminary statements you want to make before you call your witness? And I'll give you a chance, certainly, Ms. Sandler, if you'd like.
Judge, I'm going to rely on my motion as my opening statement. I believe the court indicated it's read that.
And I just read it again yesterday, and as well as the state's response. So I don't need any sort of introductory, but if y'all want to provide one, you certainly can. Otherwise, we can proceed, Ms. Sandler.
Your Honor, I would just briefly state that the state would beg the court to look at this and how that fits into the law as the testimony.
Okay. All right. Mr. Norris, are you ready to testify?
Yes, sir.
All right. I think having him up here at the
That's fine,
actual
Judge.
witness stand.
I don't have to leave. This is my first rodeo.
This room is not conducive for
No.
that.
So I said this is normally used for child dependency hearings, which is why it's got the kind of four-table setup, but it's the only thing we've really got available to us
Yes, sir.
today. All right. Mr. Norris, I've already sworn you in. You understand that everything you say is under oath and subject to perjury?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go ahead with your questions, Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Mr. Norris, please state your name for the record.
Donald Franklin Norris.
Judge, just so that I'm not far away from the microphone, will the court allow me to sit?
I'll certainly allow you to sit. Obviously, there's no lectern in here that has a microphone that will work, so I'm fine with the attorneys remaining seated during questioning.
Thank you, Judge.
Go ahead.
All right. Mr. Norris, I'm going to ask you the initial question, then I'll ask you the basis for it, okay?
Yes, sir.
When this incident happened, when Joe got shot, were you afraid that you were going to be attacked?
Yes, sir.
All righty. Now, who was there when this happened?
My estranged wife and Joe McComb.
And your estranged wife is Tracy Smith?
Yes, sir.
All righty, sir. Now, how long have you and Tracy been together?
We're still married, so it would be 25 years.
During the course of that 25 years, had there been any court cases involving any acts or threats of violence between the two of you?
Just the past couple of years prior to this.
Were there incidents where she was charged with violence on you?
Yes, sir.
All righty. And was Did you ever seek an injunction against her?
Yes, sir.
Was that injunction granted, or was it dropped, or what happened on the injunction?
In the first case, it was domestic violence, and it was just came with the charges until it was resolved. And in the second one, it was same situation, but she'd violated it and came back, and I'd instituted the injunction where she'd pulled a knife on me, and they found the knife on her. Then the next day, she's back out on bond and back out the house. I'm like, well, they're not going to do anything, so why keep the injunction going? I mean, I didn't fight her from that point on. I just sort of let her come home. I felt sorry for her.
Well, tell the court about these acts and threats of violence.
It stemmed from her addiction. The first 20 years of our marriage, we didn't have no problems. She got real bad on her pain medications that she was taking.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to relevance at this point.
Okay. How is
Judge,
this relevant?
anything considered by the defendant in determining that he had a basis to fear violence is admissible and can be considered by the jury, even if it's incorrect. This goes to his state of mind. I have some case law on it.
I'll overrule the objection. Go ahead.
All right, so Mr. Norris, you said that there were concerns over an addiction to pain medication. Please pick up where you left off.
Yes, sir. She got way out of control with it. Started seeking other narcotics on the street. You know, she'd lost several of her doctors. She was like doing what they call doctor shopping, and I'd warned her against that it came with legal ramifications, and it didn't slow her down. And she finally lost her doctor, and she comes at me with a plea that she needed help, and asked me if we could adopt our granddaughter that was addicted to narcotics in Nick C unit in Alabama. And I kind of shied away from it. And I told her, really, we've got our kids out of the house. It's time for us. And I'm not really up to taking in another baby, an infant, especially one that's addicted. And then she talked me. She talked me into going and seeing the baby. And when I saw the child, I was hooked, line, sinker, 6 foot of the pier. I fell in love with the baby. And I told her under the conditions that she would seek help. We'd go to marriage counseling, and she'd get off the drugs, that I wasn't going to have that baby raised up in it, and that I'd do anything and everything to protect that child.
Now, when did this happen in relation to the violent acts, the criminal charges, the other things that you've described?
It's in the 3 years to this building up. This is the snowball.
Yes, sir.
Going down the hill. This is the starting of it. We got the child. We were granted temporary guardianship. We did the whole family first network, whole 9 yards. I sunk about $50,000 into securing this child home and a life. I dedicated her to God and told him I'd do everything in my power to protect her, and she would never have to go through nothing like that the rest of her life as long as I lived. We did good. The doctors told us that her being addicted to the narcotics that she was on, that she wouldn't be physically and mentally, she'd have some kind of impairment.
Hold on.
Don't
Sustained.
Judge, in general, hearsays relied upon by the defendant is admissible, but Mr. Norris, I think on that we're getting a little far afield.
Yes,
All
sir.
right, Mr. Williams, I'll make the rulings that I've made. I'm sustaining the objection.
Yes, sir. So going back to the acts or threats of violence, was there a point that she began using other drugs that were not pain medication related?
Yes, sir. When she lost her doctors, we were both going to see a pain management doctor at this time, and I'm like, I'm done with the meds, because the baby's parents were using that as an excuse as to why they were using medication, that they were addicted. And I said, no, it can be done. It takes willpower and reliance on.
All right, so what other drugs did she begin using?
Methamphetamine, what they call rolls. Some of them call them beans or something like that. I'm not sure what it is, but I found them in her purse, and that's what she told me they were, rolls. And she got to where she was just experimenting pretty much with anything and whatever was coming down the pike.
In terms of the people that she was associating with, did those people give you any concerns? Well, let me go back. Did she ever make any threats towards you? Ever say that she was gonna do anything to you?
Yes, sir. When I turned her over, I turned the baby back over to FFN, she got very vindictive, because I told her if the baby ever become in harm's way, that I would turn it in. I would not have her around it. And she was taking this baby to trap houses, and I found out that that's where she was going. She'd tell me all kind of lies, covering it. She'd say she's going to the store, and she'd be gone 5-6 hours and come back, and then I'd find out she was just going to this trap house and just the baby sitting around there in it, and I said, I'm not having that.
What did she say to you that was a threat? Can you be specific?
Oh, that she would see me dead. She would see me in a pine box, insane asylum, or prison the rest of my life.
Now, when was there an incident when you? Well,
yes, sir. It all came to a head one morning. My bank card had come up missing out of my wallet, and I knew it was there prior that night. And I got up and I was going to go to the store and get something, and I couldn't find my card. And she put out like she didn't know where it was at. She didn't know what was going on. And so I called the company and had the card shut down, and somebody had done hit me for like $300 off of it. And I explained to her, that was our light bill money. And she just got very distant from me. And I started researching into trying to locate where the card had been used to have them where they would prosecute who the person was that had stole my card. Well, when I finally found out, I was on the phone that morning. They're telling me that it was somebody that you gave permission to. I'm like, no, nobody's got permission to use my card. And they told me it was her. And I looked at her real funny, and that's when she went off on me. I started cussing and yelling at the guy. I'd been on call for like 4 hours that morning trying to straighten all this mess out. And the baby's there wanting to use my phone. We let her play on it and us. I'm like, Tracy, will you please just get the baby for a few minutes? Let me finish straightening this out. And she started cussing and ranting, and I'm like, just going completely off. And I'm like, wow. So I pick up the phone, I pick up my paperwork, and I'm headed out the door. And here she comes down the hallway and picks up a coffee cup off the table. And she rears it back like she's going to smash me with it. I'm like, you better not, Tracy. No, you better not. Put the cup down. And she just dashed the coffee all over me. I said, no, you didn't. So I walked outside and called 911, hoping that they'd just come out and just stem the problem. But when the officers got there, they're like, no, she's going to jail. I'm like, no, sir, please don't take her to jail. That's not what I don't think that's going to solve anything. She needs help.
was there a point where you dropped the charges in that case or filed a request to drop the charges?
I moved out. They called and told me, said, if she's got summers to go, we'll let her out on bond. I said, well, here, let her come home. I'll grab a few things and I'll leave. I want her back in her home. I wasn't trying to harm her. I was trying to get her to realize she needed help. We needed help. And everywhere I turned, nobody was helping us.
When was there a point where you were driving her home basically from the jail?
That was the second time that she jumped on me and bloodied me all up.
And tell the court about that incident, and then I'll ask you what she said when you were taking her home.
She told me if I'd help her get straightened back out, she promised me the world. We'd get the baby back. She'd do whatever it took. She'd go to counseling. We'd go to marriage counseling. She'd get rehab. If I would just help her get straightened out, she promised me the world. We'd get back on track with our life. So I fell for it again, hook, line, and sinker. That was after she'd violated the injunction and pulled the knife on me and all that. I really loved Tracy.
What did she say to you when, all right, so there was an arrest made. What did she say to you after you dropped the charges and you were driving her home?
She pretty much had threatened me into dropping the charges, and I'm like, well, if I drop them, surely the state will pick it up, being the situation is like it is and the injunction being violated.
Well, tell us how she threatened you to get you
On the way
dropped.
home, I said, she's like, you know, I'm going to get even with you. I'm like, what do you mean you're going to get even? No, that's not what you told me. You said if I would do this, that you would go to rehab, we'd get marriage counseling, we'd get our life straightened out and get back on track for where we're supposed to be. And at that point, it just really got scary. She was telling me that she had a clan. She was going to have, that she had 10 guys lined up was going to take me out. And 2 prior to Joe had approached me with the hit that she had put out on me.
Tell me, this Joe, is this the same person that was shot that night?
Yes, sir.
All right, so tell the court about that.
I hadn't seen Joe since he was probably 20 years old. Me and him had worked together on a construction site for Robinson Construction. I liked Joe. I mean, I didn't have no problem with him. Didn't have an axe to grind, no anger problems, no bad blood or nothing between me and him. But that night, when I come back from the hospital and seen him out there.
No, sir, I'm talking about, you said Joe came and told you something about a hit on you.
No, sir, it wasn't Joe. It was Eric Pippin and Wiley Hill.
All right, I misunderstood then. All right, so this group of incidents, when were they in relation to the night that Joe got killed?
Probably a month or so prior to that. Okay. Tracy had got real bad about staying gone. She was running out with that crew at night, and they were stealing like catalytic converters and stuff. And then she'd come back and she'd be bragging on him. I said, you know how serious of a crime that is? And I just couldn't keep her away from that element. And she kept telling me, won't you come go with me? I said, no, I'm not getting involved in none of that.
Now, had Joe himself said anything threatening to you prior to that night?
No, sir, I'd never seen him.
Okay. Now, tell us about where you were Baker acted.
I had been losing all my belongings and been coming up missing. I had almost any kind of tool you'd want in the construction field. I was a handyman, from digging footers to lock and key. So I had pretty much all the tools of the trade that was needed to perform my occupation. And they started coming up missing, just disappearing. And then when I would tell Tracy, she'd be like, oh, you're crazy. You're just going crazy. There ain't nothing missing. Ain't nobody messing with anything. But I knew that it was gone. Then she burnt my clothes. She just would do off-the-wall things. It's just like she was just a completely different person. One second I'd be in there working on my shop bench in the bedroom doing something. She'd come in like, baby, you want me to fix you a glass of tea or something? I'd be like, yeah, that would be nice. And she'd come right back in the door. I'm not fixing you nothing. She got some audacity to be all bossing and ordering me around. I'm like, where is this coming from? It's like it was 2 different people I was living with. And I called them, Tracy was my wife, and her alter ego was Darlene. Tracy had been on psych medications she was bipolar, and she'd quit all of her medications except for the Percocets, Xanax, what she could find on the street. She said that she should have been doing that a long time ago, that she felt like that just leveled her back out. I'm like, no, it's a bad mixture. You're doing a deadly cocktail. You're going to die. I try every way I could to turn her away from it. And every time I would pull her out of a rabbit hole, get her straight back on her feet, get us some kind of straightened out, she'd run further back down the rabbit hole. Just
how would she react with you to these efforts to, the way you phrase it, was pull her out of the rabbit hole?
She would get very violent. She would just go off. Hit me. She knows that I'm not going to hit a woman. I've got self-control. I'm trained in self-discipline. And I would tolerate it up to a point to where when she started stabbing me and I started bleeding over it, I'm like, no, this has got to stop.
All right, so tell us about the incident where you were stabbed.
She left one night. It got to where it was like every night I could set my watch by it. She would come up with some little petty argument to have to leave. And I got to the point where I'm like, well, you know, we don't have to fight. If you're going to do all of that, just go. Please, just go. I'm tired of it. I'm done with it. And when I say I'm done, boy, she'd really get mad. That night, she left, told me she was going to be back. She wanted her bed made, and she wanted clean sheets on it. She wanted pillowcases. Oh, she gave me a whole list of demands that I was to do. Well, at that point, I was done with it, tired, and I got to where I was bucking her instead of doing what she demanded and just falling down at her feet and trying to please her. I seen that wasn't working. So I was just going to stand up, grow a backbone, stand my ground on it. No, I'm not doing that. That's not my place. If you want that done, then you should stay here and do it yourself. Well, she came in about 2 o'clock, and instead of making the bed,
Now, was that 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning?
Instead of making the bed, I tore it all apart and set some flea bombs off in the bedroom because we had a flea problem in there. And when she come in, I was already asleep on the sofa in the living room. She went back to the bedroom, and I heard a bunch of crashing and banging. So I just rolled over and kind of put my head under the pillow, partially. Wake up to her slamming the phone on me. She hit me with the phone, her phone. And she's standing over me, yelling and cussing and screaming, like, what do you think you was accomplishing by that? Telling me everything I was and everything I wasn't, up and down the road. I stood up. She hit me again with the phone, and I grabbed her hand, took the phone away from her, and hugged her up to me and said, Tracy, it ain't got to be like this. You know, it's got to quit. It's got to quit. That's when she latched hold, bit me on my face, just like a bulldog, just latched hold of me. And I took her head off of it. I put her down by my side. I said, quit. You got to quit. Please just stop. And then she latched hold back here on my back. I swung her around, and when I swung her around, she flew off, and her head bounced off the floor, and she got a goose egg on her head. And I said, Tracy, this has got to quit. And she come at me again, and I took her and set her out the front door, and my hands are bleeding where I took the phone because it was busted. When she hit me with it, it busted. So I was holding the door shut, and my hands all bloody. She grabbed it, and I'd never seen nobody that much strength. She just snatched the door back out of my hand, and she's standing there, and she's got a unicorn. She's got a horn on it about 2 inches long, and she reaches out, and she stabbed me in the side with it, and I backed up and said, oh, you stabbed me, I'm bleeding. And then she threw it at me. Pushed her back out the door, held the door shut, hit me in the groin with it when she threw it at me, and I was down on my knees trying to regain my feet back under me. And she snatches the door back open, and she's standing there, she's got the other one in her hand. So I backed up against the kitchen counter. She flung it at me. About that time, I heard somebody coming up, and it was her mom. And her mom come in, and she started getting on to her. Tracy, quit. You better quit, Tracy, Darlene, stop it. Her mom pretty well squashed it that night. Tracy went on into the bedroom and was making a lot of yelling and screaming, and I'm like, Mom, she won't quit. She's just going off on me like that. She's been doing that ever since she come in. And Mom told me, she said, you just need to hush, Ronnie. Just let her go, let her go. And her mom talked her into leaving, told her, said, Tracy, just go over to my house. Y'all, that's it for tonight. So I was kind of relieved that her mom had come in. You know, Tracy had got in her car and left, I suppose, and went back up to the trap house that she'd been hanging out at. And I'm supposing that because that's where the police officers found her at. I woke up the next morning, blood everywhere. I see my blood all over, and I said, she's going to kill me. I can't just let this go. She's going to kill me if I let this continue like it's going. So I called the police out, and they did their thing. The ambulance and all the medics came out, and they checked me over. asked me if I wanted to go to the hospital. I'm like, no, I'm just in shock right now from all of it, just trying to rationalize it all in my mind, how it got this bad and went this far.
Now, when was this incident, excuse me, let me ask this first. This was the incident that after you dropped it and you were taking her home, she made the comment
Yes,
about
sir.
getting you? Yes, sir. All right. And that was about a month before
Yes, sir.
Joe was shot? Okay. So was there a point where you got picked up on a Baker Act?
Yes, sir, it was right the day before the incident, a couple of days before. Her and one of her friends, because I'd done moved all the belongings I had left in my name and had them unlock and key in my bedroom and was sitting on them to keep them from continually walking off. Anything that I could salvage that was left, looking for a way out.
Now, prior to this, had you noticed belongings turning up missing?
Oh, yes, sir.
Was there anybody else that had usual access to the house besides you and Tracy?
No, sir.
Now, so tell us about when they came out. Well, when they came out and Baker acted, you get taken to the hospital?
Yes, sir. I was fixing a pizza. I'd put a pizza in the oven, fixing to sit down and eat. And I looked and I seen a deputy coming up the driveway. And I'm like, well, what's he here for? I'm like, oh, no. I thought the worst. Something might have happened to Tracy, or she'd finally hit somebody head on, passing out behind the wheel. She'd done wrecked 3 vehicles, totaled them from her drug use and fallen asleep behind the wheel. When he come to the door, I'm like, it was Mr. Howard, Jody Howard. And I said, what's wrong? Is there something I can do for you? He said, you got to come go with me. I said, for what? Am I being arrested? What did I do? He said, no, you're not being arrested. He said, I've got an ex parte. I'm like, ex parte? What's an ex parte? And he went to explain to me. He said, Jody, if you take me out here, man, I won't have nothing left of my name if I have to leave here. I've been sitting on it till I can get somewhere to go and take it. He's like, no, it's signed by a judge, Ronnie. You got to go.
All right, so were you ultimately seen by a psychologist or psychiatrist there at the facility?
Yes, sir. They transported me 5 or 6 different swap outs in transit and finally got me to the hospital. It was probably right at dark. And I'm assuming the doctor wasn't there that night. The nurses did their intake. Next morning, a couple of nurses came in, I guess psychologists, assistants. They come in and did their preliminary questions, and I told them about the baby and all, and what had led up to me being here. They wanting to know just, I guess, a background. The doctor came in probably around 2 o'clock that afternoon, and she spoke with me. She says, what are you doing in my hospital? I was ex
Hold on,
parte.
sir. Sir, when there's an
I'm
objection,
sorry.
I need you to stop.
I believe he's about to get in.
Okay, Mr.
Judge, again,
Williams.
this goes to state of mind.
How's it relevant to his state of mind? I mean, other than at that particular moment.
I believe that what this is going to lead to is when he is dealing with them that night, he's also dealing with the fact that she was able to just call and have him locked up, even though there was no basis for it. And he knows at that point, after hearing from the doctor, that there was no basis for it.
I'm going to overrule the objection, but I'm going to give it the proper weight once I hear everything that's testified to.
Yes, sir. All right, so make a long story a little less long. Basically, she was of the opinion that you were could be released.
But she told me the grounds for ex parte was I'd have to be suicidal, homicidal, or not able to take care of myself. None of that was even in the order. It was some trumped up stories that her and her friend had come up with, and her saying that I was talking to the baby and the baby not there. The only reference I'd made to the baby is I was still making toys and stuff for her. I make stuffed animals too. And I'd say, Haley would really like this. She'd say, doll, you so silly. Things like that. And I was commenting to Tracy, I was going through a bout of depression over losing the baby and the state of my marriage, and 21 years of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears circling the drain, and nothing I could do to pull it out. And everything I did seem to do just was futile.
Now, so when were you released?
She told me to let her go ahead and get processed, so I spent the first night, seen her that afternoon, then I stayed the second night. She did, I guess she had to do all her, I'm not sure what all happened. It was probably around lunchtime before they got to me the next day, so I spent 2 nights.
All righty. Now, after you got released, where did you go?
They Ubered me. I tried calling, Tracy had called that afternoon. Over the phone, she's like, "Hey, baby, how you doing? Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, you had me locked into a mental facility." I said, "All I want from you is a divorce. I'm done, Tracy. I'm finished with it." And that word divorce, when I say divorce to her, well, she just go off. Just, you're not getting a divorce. You're not leaving me. I'll see you in a pine box before you leave out of here. Things like that, or I'll have you beat down. I'll have you killed. Why's it got to be like that? Why can't we be just like normal people and go get a divorce? Why do I got to die? Why can't I have a life? She was just iterate. No, you're leaving here in a pine box. So I didn't know where to go from there with that.
When you were released, did you contact anybody?
I
Try to get a ride or
yes,
something
sir,
like
I went
that?
down the road and called my dad and told him that I'm done here. I'm going to need a ride, but it was getting later on in the evening that day, and he's being elderly. He said he wasn't going to be able to make it that night, but he'd be there first thing the next morning. And I told Officer Elliott that when he came out, I said, just tonight, and I'll be out here in the morning.
All right.
It
So
didn't go down like that.
what did you find when you got home?
Came back up the road from the neighbor's house because she done tore my phone up where I couldn't use it. She just pretty much had me stranded there, no way of going. She had my credit cards, she had my bank cards, she had my driver's license, no ID. She done burnt all my clothes, so I just had the clothes left on my back. What few little tools that I'd seen was out there in the shed that was left. It was all gone, everything. When I got home from the hospital, I'd seen that the house was disheveled and the back door was set in a jar. And I stuck my head in and seen the bedroom and all tore all to pieces. So that's when I backed out and went over to Jennifer's house across the street, her and Ed. And I asked him if I could use his phone. And I called the deputies to come out and investigate. What I assumed at that moment was a burglary, that somebody had broke in the house. I'm not thinking the worst about her.
All right, so you weren't necessarily thinking that she had done it at that point.
No,
You were
sir.
thinking that maybe somebody had broken in.
The people that she was hanging around with, that's whatever they could, Velcro, whatever stuck to them, it was theirs.
All right, sir. Do you recall who came out and responded?
I don't remember their names. I'd seen so many deputies in that past few months, it was ridiculous. Every time they'd come out and I'd explain to them what was going on, they'd tell me there's nothing we can do till something happens.
Now, you told us about that the place was disheveled. Can you be more specific?
Yes, sir. The house was all tore apart. Everything was pretty much gone. None of her belongings were in there, but some clothes that I guess she had brought back and strode all over the place, all over the bedroom floor. The bed was all tore apart and leaning against the windowsill. My wall safe that was up on the wall, I had a wooden wall safe. It was all beat to pieces and tore off the wall. Just the back part of it that was screwed to the wall was left there. A lot of furniture missing. My business desk in the living room that I kept all my business paperwork and all in, it was gone. Tree stand that I had built, whatnot stand, it was gone. The house was all like messed up. There was paraphernalia and all in the bedroom window. I gave it to the deputy when he came out. When I was putting the bed back together, the only thing left to my name was my old shotgun. And how it had got in the windowsill there in the bedroom, just beat me. I'm like, my gun.
Where was it normally kept?
I kept it in the heater closet in the hallway, hid because of things walking off. It was a family heirloom, so that was pretty significant to me.
Now, was there an issue having the main receiver part of the weapon attached to the stock?
Yes, sir. The gun was well used. I'd had it since I was 12 years old. Had hunted pretty frequently with it. And the last time I had harvested a deer with it, the barrel had come off of my hand. I said, well, it's time to retire. She's no longer good for high brass or 3-inch Magnum. So I just used it to scare hogs out of the food plot in the front yard. We had a real bad hog problem. I'd fed deer in the front yard, and I didn't want them just tearing up my yard and eating all the deer corn.
How did you attach it back to the stock?
I had zip ties on it.
Okay. Let me ask you about the burn pit. Had you used the burn pit for anything by the time the first 2 officers came out?
No, sir. When I was walking around with him surveying what was going on, I'd noticed around the burn pit remnants of my shop business desk, pieces of my clothing, like buttons and my snaps off my jeans, stuff like that around the edge of the burn pit. My coffee cups, special to me, burnt and broke. And I told him, I said, well, it wasn't a burglar. It must have been her. Here's remnants of all my personal belongings.
Was there anybody else that would have had reason to destroy keepsakes?
Not that I would.
Now, had you done any damage to her property when you first got home?
When I started cleaning the house up, I'd gathered back her clothing that she had scattered all over the place, and I just threw them back out on the front porch in the thought that if she wants them, she can come get them off the porch.
Okay. Now,
she'd moved out 2 weeks prior to that and took all of her personal stuff and had put it in storage at her friend's house, a girl named Debbie. Told me that's where she was keeping her things at.
Now, tell us about, was there an incident where, that same night, where other officers came out?
But I was coming back from up the neighbor's house using the phone.
All right, so let's start with that then. Did you go someplace and use the phone?
Yes, sir.
Where did you go?
I went down into J.B. Lane to a neighbor's house, Jonathan Carr. Asked him, he was the only one I could find that was home at that time. I went to Roberts, and I went back over to Ed and Jennifer's, but they weren't home. So I went down to where I normally didn't want to go. That was my only option. I was looking for a way away from there.
All right, so you were looking for somebody to pick you up and take you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and trying to call around and find somebody?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So you said you were walking back, and did you have some contact with law enforcement officers?
No, sir. When I got out to the end of the road, fixing to cross the pavement, Tracy, Joe, Rhea, and Zane are there on the new car that I'd bought her. Joe's standing up by the in front of the driver's door. Rhea's at the back passenger door, and Zane's on the other side, passenger side at the front of the car, and Tracy's standing there at the back of it with her back to me. I come walking across, I'm like, what's going on? She turns around and she just starts in on me immediately. I don't want to talk to you. I ain't got nothing to say to you. I see what you done to the house, and I hadn't done nothing to the house but start cleaning it up. I'm like, I don't know what your problem is. She said, the law's on the way, and they'll take care of you when they get here. Joe comes walking from the front of the car all the way around to the back right in front of Tracy, and he leans back on the car, crosses his feet and his arms. I said, Joe, you're in the wrong, man. You don't need to be here. You don't know what all's been going on. He says, no, I'm in the right, and crossed his arms, and that's all he said to me that whole night. That's the only words I heard out of that man's mouth. I said, well, okay, and I threw my arms up and walked onto the house saying, well, when the law gets here, we'll let them deal with it. Went on back down to the house, continuing cleaning up the yard and stuff that was all strode in the yard, and I seen the officers pull up. It was Officer Elliott Howard, the lady officer that was with him. I can't remember her name. I've seen her on a couple of other occasions. She's a real tall, blonde-headed lady. He approached me and asked me what was going on, and I told him that, asked him, I said, well, do y'all don't swap stories when y'all change shifts or anything? He said, the officers were just out here. They didn't let you know what had been going on or what's been transpiring out here today. He said, no, we don't do that. I explained my situation to him, and he asked me about the Baker Act and all that, and I showed him my paperwork. I let him walk through the house, check things out. He started back out and he went to go get in his cruiser. And at the moment he went to step in his cruiser, he just stopped, whirls around, folds his arms over himself and said, Mr. Norris, as a representative of the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department, what may I do in service for you tonight? I paused. I thought that was kind of strange for him acting out of character all of a sudden like that. Then I looked at him. I said, well, if she wants to come down here, if you can get her and bring her down here and she wants to be civil and we can go over our things and what she wants done, how we're going to do this and just go ahead with our divorce, I'm all for that. I said, but that's all I've got to say for her or to her tonight. He says, no, I'm making them leave and you're going to bed. I said, well, that's all I need is a good night's sleep anyhow. I haven't had a good night's sleep for the past 2 nights. I've got to ride out here tomorrow. That's all I need.
Now, let me ask you something. When you got home initially, between that first incident where the police showed up and this incident, did you do any, you said that you put Tracy's clothes out on the porch. Did you do anything else to them? Did you put bleach on them or anything like that?
Just started cleaning up the house. I don't know where something about a pressure cooker and hair dye and oil. I don't know where all that come into it.
Okay. Did you do anything with those items?
No, sir.
All right. Did you use any bleach on anything? When you cleaned up, or did you use bleach?
I was cleaning the kitchen counters and the sink and mopping the floors. I was doing a whole house cleanup.
Okay. All right. So the officer made this statement to you. Okay. What did you take that to mean in terms of whether or not you were going to have any further dealings with Tracy and Joe and Rhea and Zane and that group that night?
I was assured that I was safer tonight, that I was so occupant there that I wasn't going to be harmed, molested, or bothered in any way. That was my assumption.
Now, what was the status of the door? You said earlier that the door was messed up.
Yes, sir. It had been broke in so many times by who knows who, and things coming up missing. Every time I go off and come back and the house had been broke into. You couldn't lock it no more.
All right. So did you secure the door in some fashion?
Yes, sir. All I could find was a roll of 30-pound test, monofilament line, and I had some zip ties.
Fishing line?
Yes, sir. And I sewed it up. I mean, there was nails sticking out of the jamb. I wrapped it around the doorknob, wrapped it around the nails. There's a little hitch up at the top where the spring, the door release thing on it where it don't overextend. Spring loaded, got a chain and all on the trailer door. I put 2 zip ties up there on the hasp that's on the door where the chain's hooked, and on the latch part that's on the jamb where the chain's hooked. And I had fixed the place down at the bottom because somebody had been ripping the bottom of the door, and you could tell that they'd been squeezing through, just holding the bottom of the door open and squeezing somebody in. So I'd put another hasp thing on, for a lock, tied fishing line to a screw eye bolt that was in the jamb. Sewed it up with fishing line. I had it secured. She didn't open that door.
Did you attach the fishing line to anything inside the house?
Yes, sir. I had
What did you attach it to and why?
to the china cabinet and some aluminum soda cans for an early alarm system in case somebody did try to sneak in on me or break in.
Now, if you were certain that nobody would do that, why would you secure it that way, or were you not certain that nobody would do that?
I wasn't sure about nobody. I was sure about what the officer told me about Joe and Tracy and Rhea and Zane. But as far as her other friends and all these other, her clan that she called that was out to get me and going to see me, snitches get stitches and wind up in ditches, what she always tell me, because I'd been corresponding with deputies, giving them license plate numbers, dealers, names, people I knew, vehicle descriptions that were coming to my house and dropping off drugs for Tracy, or people that she was hauling around doing drug deals for and with. She got so infatuated with the whole process that she was even buying pseudo pills and other, what do you call it, other things to manufacture with. She really got her a recipe and all that. I'm like, no, you're not doing that in my home. That is not happening here, Tracy, while I'm alive. And she says she could fix that part of it.
All right, so you secured the door up. What did you do then?
I had I built knives. My dad built knives. I picked it up from him. It was just sort of like a side hobby. When I harvested deer, I wasn't a trophy hunter. I didn't put horns on the wall. I used to make knife handles with. I had magnets in my bedroom that were put knives in it, so like a knife block. I had 3 of them screwed to the wall, and I had knives that I was working on. All that's missing, but I had one blank. Just a flat piece of stainless steel that I had worked a point on and was working an edge on it, and I had stuck it. Why, I don't know. But I had stuck it under the windowsill and secured it just haphazardly. And when I had got home, I'd run my hand under there, and it was still there. That's the only one that was left out of all of it. Everything I owned, that was it. So I'd pulled it out, and I'd put the little table we had, a couple of chairs, I'd put them back in the bedroom and set the bedroom back up to where I'd be sort of comfortable for that night. I got me a drink out of the refrigerator, and I seen that pizza was still there, and I was looking forward, well, I am going to get to eat that pizza. And I sat down and I was working. I'd found a piece of copus cloth, and I was sitting there working, thinking about, well, what am I going to do now? And going over, just milling over everything in my mind.
And when you think about what are you going to do, what are you specifically thinking about?
Where am I going from there? What's the next steps for my life? I knew it was over there. I knew it was just a matter of stepping out and starting over. And that's what I had to do from scratch. But at that point, I was up to it. I realized that this is where it's at. There's no salvaging. Too much had done transpired.
Yes, sir.
And I got really afraid of Tracy and what the allegations she was making, and I just wasn't willing to put my life that far out there.
Now, when did you become aware that there was somebody outside the house? Well, let me ask you this. Did you have any further, up until the point that they come into the house, did you have any further contact with Tracy and Joe?
No, sir.
Okay. When did you first become aware that there was something going on with somebody coming in the house?
I heard somebody open the gate on the porch. Everything was real quiet in the house. And normally, if you're in the bedroom and there's a radio or something, or traffic, or it's during the daytime, no, you can't really hear nothing in the bedroom. But I had the door open, and I was sitting there real quiet, and I heard somebody come up on the porch. I'm like, is that somebody? And all of a sudden, I hear an initial yank on the door, and I hear the nylon line that I had tied to the china cabinet. I tied it to the door of it, and I heard it ronk open, and glass breaking. So my first thought is somebody's breaking in. They know they think there's nobody here. They've seen the law out there because people. those people were watching the house. I mean, I see them coming out of the wood like wild animals sometimes, just people with backpacks on and people I didn't even know, just real strange acting, like something you'd see on Day of the Dead or something.
Now, describe where your house is located for the court and what the immediate area is like. I mean, are we talking, urban? Are we talking country? Are we talking woods? What are we talking?
It's rural. I live right on the edge of a water management, 3,000-acre water management Yellow River Park. Right there where I'm at, I live on a corner of pavement and a dirt road. Got 3.5 acres right there, and her mother has had probably 10 acres that butted up to it, and then water management beyond that. Property across the pavement owned, and it's not built on. There's nobody living on it. Property next to the dirt road, there's no one in it. It's all woods, and a creek runs through it.
Where would your closest, somebody living there, someplace you could run to, something like that, neighbor be?
It would be Robert and Robin. They're on the corner.
Was that the same Robert and Robin whose house you gone to earlier when you were looking for a ride?
Yes, sir. I went there, but they no one answered the door.
Okay. All right. So you hear the crash of the china cabinet. Did just the door come off, or did the whole china cabinet go over?
It was had been cocked. It's pivoted on instead of flat and setting flat. It was setting back against the wall. It was on its back bottom corner. It had leaned against the wall, and the door was ripped off of it.
Okay. All right. So when that happened, I think you already said what you thought was going on. You were not at that point connecting it up with Tracy and Joe?
No, sir. I thought somebody was breaking in.
Okay.
See what else that they could pilfer through.
So what did you do?
I grabbed my gun, investigate. When I got to about 6 foot away from the door, Joe had it pried open far enough. Tracy was squeezing through it. And when she came through, she's on me. She's right there in my face, yelling and screaming, "You're getting out of here. I want you out of here. You're leaving." And when I seen it was her, I just relaxed the gun back down by my side in my right hand. I'm ambidextrous. I'm left-handed by nature, but I shoot right-handed. And I operate bow, gun, fishing. I do all that with my right hand. She's on me, cussing me, telling me what I am and what she's going to do, what she's going to have done, and how she's going to have me locked back up. I'm telling her, "No, you're not supposed to be here. Why are you here? The law told you to leave." "No, you're leaving," she'd tell me. And so I backed away from her, trying to put some distance between us. Then Joe comes walking through the door. He'd finished ripping it open. He comes walking in. He hasn't said nothing to me. He's real stoic. I look at him, I said, "Man, you got to get out of my house. You are not supposed to be here. Leave." She said, "No, he's here for me." I said, "No, he's not here for nobody. He's got to leave. He's trespassing." And I stepped back over towards the refrigerator. She's staying on me. And he come walking right up behind her. And I'm afraid at this point he's going to either bum rush me or he's going to jump me. So I cocked the gun and showed him that I'm cocking it with one thumb, one hand, and cocked it like that. And I raised it up center mass. I said, "Joe, I told you to get out of my house, and you got to give me some room, man. Quit walking up on me." I backed up over to the entryway of the hall. She's staying with me the whole time. He walks back up behind her. I can't see his right hand, but I can see his left hand and his whole left side.
Why can't you see his right hand?
It's behind her back.
So is he standing to her left?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I've got the gun I raised it probably 24, 30 inches away from him, center mass. It's a 30-inch full choke, 12-gauge shotgun. She says a few more things. I'm telling him, man, you got to leave. And Joe, don't be doing this. You got to leave, man. Just leave. She says, no, she didn't even she said, he's putting you out of here. And I took my attention off him for that brief second to look at her and tell her, no, he's not putting me nowhere. And I didn't even get the full sentence in my mouth. And he comes up, grabs the barrel, and snatches the gun like that, causing my thumb to slip off. I felt the kick, because I wasn't looking at him, but I felt the recoil, and I heard the boom. I felt the initial jerk, and I felt the recoil and heard the boom, and it didn't sound like a shot going off. It would sound like he'd stuck the barrel in a bucket of water or something, like a thump. When I looked back at him, instantly look back, his arm's up like this. He goes back about 2 foot and down, and he's gone. It's over. That's the stupidest thing I ever seen in my life. And she screams out, oh, you shot him, you shot him. I'm going to go get a witness. And she runs out the door. She can't get a witness after something happens. She says, no, I'm going to get a witness. And she starts screaming, Rhea, Zane, and runs out across the yard. And I went down to one knee. And there's nothing I can do for him. He's gone. I said a prayer. But I didn't have nothing against Joe. That's certainly nothing I wanted. But I wasn't going to let him hurt me in my house. And I knew if he got his hands on me, because when he kept walking up on me, I couldn't get no response. It was like I'd been attacked by bulldogs before, and right before the initial attack, they just haze over. And that's the way he was. Like he was committed to one thing and one thing only. I couldn't talk him out of it, couldn't back him out of it. A 12-gauge shotgun couldn't convince him any different.
What did you think he was going to do to you physically?
Oh, if he'd got a hold of me, Joe's 20 years my junior, probably had 100 pounds on me, a foot in height. I figured, knowing what kind of life he led, lifestyle, and knew that he was a convicted felon. Hear things
Objection, Your
around.
Honor.
All right, hold on.
How is that relevant?
Judge, for the same reasons I've stated before, it goes to his state of mind, why he was afraid. It frankly doesn't even matter if it's true.
Well, I think it does matter if it's true, and you need to lay a foundation if you want him to talk about that, Mr. Williams. Sustained.
Had you previously been apprised that he had a felony conviction?
Been hanging around that same circle that Tracy was running in.
Okay.
I could tell there was something wrong when he came in the door. He wasn't Joe. I could tell that he was either impaired. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that he wasn't.
Objection, Your Honor.
Grounds.
Relevance. There's no evidence that he was under the influence, that he saw him use drugs. He's talking about past behavior.
Yes,
He's
ma'am,
also
I found
previously-
their
Sir, I don't need you to respond to the
He's
state
also
attorney,
previously
please.
testified that he had no contact with Mr. McCombs for a while. So I'm very confused how this is relevant.
Well, Judge, on the question of, well, I will present evidence or I believe I'll be able to present evidence when the medical examiner testifies. But he, of course, would not know the specifics of that. Right now, what we're dealing with is what was in his mind, why he was afraid, and to explain why he felt the need to brandish a firearm at this point.
Well, I'm going to sustain the objection as far as what he was testifying to. However, what his observations were, but his own testimony, as the state just said, was that he hadn't seen him in months.
Without going into too much detail, was he acting the way he normally did when you dealt with him? Okay. Was the fact that he was acting differently something that you considered in terms of why you didn't just put the gun down or?
things that she had been saying and telling me that she had guys lined up. I just figured he was next on her list.
Okay. When you saw that it was Joe and Tracy, did that cause you to feel relieved that you didn't need the gun anymore?
No, sir. That just made all kind of flags go off. I knew that I was in peril. Nowhere to go, nobody to call, no phone to use, no retreat.
Now, at that time, did you have an operational telephone? And the closest place that you could go to, those folks had already not been home when you went by there.
I was trying my best to make it back to the back door and to my bedroom, trying to retreat from them. They had me pinned into a position where I didn't feel safe backing up. I wasn't going to turn my back to them and walk or run away. I just felt like I had to stand my ground.
Did you ever know Joe to have experience with firearms or own a firearm or use a firearm? Or is it this is Holt?
We all raised on shotguns like that. That's what we were raised on. It's a well-known around there. Good old boys. We all hang out. We all shoot shotguns. We shoot cans. We do target practice. I mean, Joe was raised country.
Were you at all concerned by the fact you could not see his right hand?
But no, because Tracy had pulled knives on me before. She'd pulled guns on me before. She stuck her dad's service pistol in my head a couple of times. I didn't know that she didn't have it behind her back where his hand was.
Sorry, the objection got me a little sidetracked, Judge. Now, were you aware whether or not the shotgun was loaded?
When I had initially seen it in the windowsill there, I had breached it, and I thought it odd because it had a 3-inch Magnum high brass shell in it. I didn't shoot those in it no more. I didn't know who had loaded it or where the shell had even come from. But I was kind of relieved that it was there once I felt like I was going to be there stranded by myself with no protection.
All right. What were you afraid was going to happen to you?
She was going to pull through on her promises. I was going to have her and him both to defend myself against.
Well, did you think you were going to get in a fist fight, or did you think something else?
Kill me. That's what she had promised.
And the things that you've told us about here today, were those things that you were thinking about in making that decision?
It had got that bad with her, with the knives, the guns, and the trying to run over me with a car. Crazy, off the wall, spur of the moment things.
All right, you didn't tell us about her trying to run you over with a car. Tell us about that.
That was the day that she'd packed all her stuff up and was leaving. I went out there and she jumped in the car, and I had some of my things on, so I went to open the passenger door. She had it locked, so I picked up a rock and hit the handle with it in hopes to open it, and she jumped in the car, and so I just walked to the back of it, and she looks out, turns her hands and look out in the back and just puts it in reverse and slams down on the gas pedal. I had to jump out of the way from getting run over. The deputy was called out that day.
Now, when you say center mass, point on your body where you're talking about.
Right there.
All right. Did you have the gun pointed at anybody's head?
No, sir.
When he grabbed the gun and pulled on it, is that where the...
I wasn't
gun
looking
went?
at it, but as assuming that's what happened because it was right there, and he grabbed it up like that.
Did you have your finger inside the trigger guard?
I could hold it comfortably with one hand. I didn't have it brandished. I didn't have it shouldered. I didn't have it to my hip. I didn't have it really secured. It was there for comfort. And full thought in my mind is like, nobody's going to come up on that. Surely this is my last line of defense, and nobody's going to try and breach that. I never even thought anybody would be that brazen, maybe a safe way to say it.
Did you feel like there was any way, under the circumstances, for the situation to be resolved without you having the gun in your possession?
She was very volatile, and I had been on the receiving end of her meth rages, where she'd go off on me and for a glass that I had drank out of and just put water in and set it in the sink because I didn't wash it and put it away. Really? I mean, it got to where it was just violent confrontation. Like she would up the ante every time. At first, it just started out, we would bicker and back and forth. Then we would yell back and forth. Then it got to where she would escalate it every time it made its full circle. She would up the ante every time till it got to the point to where she was hitting on me, punching on me, kicking me, biting me, stabbing me, wake me up from a dead sleep, being sucker punched in the face because I didn't wait up on her all night. I went to bed and went to sleep. Just things like that. It just unbelievable.
Was there any way that you could see, well, let me ask you this. Did you believe that what they were going to do to you was going to happen right then, or were you worried about something sometime in the future?
I was out of there and she knew it. That was her last opportunity to see me beaten, bloody, and put out.
Did you believe that you were just going to be bruised up, or did you believe it was going to be worse?
From the last rant that she'd had on me and me not being able to console her or get anything under control or talk her down, no, I knew it was on. She was going to see it through. If it hadn't been for her mother that night, there's no telling how far it would have got.
Can you be specific, more specific than it was on?
Could not console her. Once she reached that point, she's going all the way through. She's taking it to the.
Did you believe you were going to die?
Yes, sir.
Did Joe have your permission to be in the house?
No, sir.
In terms of the house, had you been responsible for, well, let me ask you this, was the house owned outright, or was there any kind of mortgage or anything like that on it?
No, sir. We had it tied up in a trust to where it couldn't be levied against or sold. It was to go, my half, if that was the way it was going to be, was to go to my granddaughter, Haley.
And you referred to your half. Did you have any ownership interest in the house?
Yes, sir. That's my blood, sweat, and tears for 21 years. I took a piece of swamp dirt and made a showplace out of it.
Judge, that's all I have at this time.
Ms. Sandler, are you ready? Cross-examination?
I am, Your Honor. It's 10:30.
I don't, but if anyone else needs, I'm certainly willing to give it. Why don't we take about a 10-minute break just to make sure everyone's comfortable, and we'll recess at about 10:40.
Thank you, Judge.
For years, I proudly served Florida as a state trooper. During that time, I investigated over 1,000 car, motorcycle, and trucking crashes. My mission was simple: to help the victims. Now, as an injury attorney, I can do even more to help accident victims. Hi, I'm attorney Coy Browning. If you've been injured in a car accident, I'd be honored to help you. Call or visit us at browninglawfirm.com.
Hi, I'm Wanda Roberts. For the last 20 years, I've been helping the residents of Northwest Florida buy and sell their properties. My office is just 1 block south of the courthouse in historic downtown Crestview. Give us a call at 850-398-5389.
Hi, I'm Michael Gilbert, defense attorney with Warrior Law. I represent those. Hi, I'm attorney Michael Gilbert, and from all of us here at Warrior Law, we wish you and yours a safe and happy holidays.
Hello, this is Chris Norman at Bulldog Bail Bonds. Our office is in Crestview, Florida, but we service 7 Northwest Florida counties. If you ever find yourself in a jam, please give us a call. We're here to help you out.
Congratulations, Crestview's very own Dixie Dan Powell of Powell Injury Law, for your recent jury verdict of $11.5 million for your client from a death and injury against an inflatable amusement company. Recognized in 2017 as one of the top 100 civil trial lawyers in the state of Florida, and Dixie is AV preeminent rated. Dixie Dan Powell works tirelessly for his clients, as is evident by this extraordinary verdict. If you're taking your case to trial, be prepared. Contact Dixie Dan Powell and Powell Injury Law, 850-306-2667.
Backbone Bakery Cafe is 2 blocks from the courthouse on Crestview's historic Main Street. We serve handmade pastries, espresso, and lunch items, and we're open Tuesday to Saturday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., serving lunch from 11 to 2. We hope to see you soon.
Hello, I am Bonnie from Body Be Healthy here in Crestview. We have been serving the area since 1999. We're an alternative health food store. If you're interested in bettering your health, we'd like to invite you to stop by. We're located in Court Plaza. Stop by and let us help you be healthy.
I'm Amanda Gaskin with Briar Patch Realty. Helping qualified heroes save money is my passion. When I help a hero buy or sell a home, they receive a check from Homes for Heroes. Check out amandasheroes.com for more information.
For more than 70 years, the sweet aroma of the Crestview's Coney Islands burgers and hot dogs has permeated the downtown area. If you have not experienced the unique flavor of Crestview's Coney Islands burgers and hot dogs, then I encourage you to join us for lunch. Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m., Friday from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m., and Saturday from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. We're located in historic downtown Crestview at 107 North Main Street. Call 850-683-1045.
CQ Roofing, your hometown roofer since 1999. We're state licensed and insured, family owned and operated with 24 years of local service. We specialize in shingles and metal, re-roofs, repairs, and leak specialists. For all of your roofing needs, call us today or visit our website at cqroofing.com. CQ Roofing, your hometown roofer.
Hey, I'm David at Family Vision of Crestview. We've been providing excellent optical service for Northwest Florida for over 34 years. Come in and let us take care of you.
This is Tiffany Woodham, State Farm's newest agent in Crestview. I'd like to personally invite you to stop by my office for a no-cost policy review. Let me help you start saving today. Call in, walk in, or click in at yourcrestviewagent.com.
Hi, this is Alex Barthay from the UPS store in Crestview, Florida. We also have Eglin Air Force Base and Fort Walton Beach. So if you're seeing me, it must mean it's Old St. Nick is right around the corner, and we want to help you to be able to get your packages to your loved ones. So for the UPS store, UPS has deadlines starting on the 20th of this month.
For years, I proudly served Florida as a state trooper. During that time, I investigated over 1,000 car, motorcycle, and trucking crashes. My mission was simple: to help the victims. Now, as an injury attorney, I can do even more to help accident victims. Hi, I'm attorney Coy Browning. If you've been injured in a car accident, I'd be honored to help you. Call or visit us at browninglawfirm.com.
Hi, I'm Wanda Roberts. For the last 20 years, I've been helping the residents of Northwest Florida buy and sell their properties. My office is just one block south of the courthouse in historic downtown Crestview. Give us a call at 850-398-5389.
Hi, I'm Michael Gilbert, defense attorney with Warrior Law. I represent those. Hi, I'm attorney Michael Gilbert, and from all of us here at Warrior Law, we wish you and yours a safe and happy holidays.
Hello, this is Chris Norman at Bulldog Bail Bonds. Our office is in Crestview, Florida, but we service 7 Northwest Florida counties. If you ever find yourself in a jam, please give us a call. We're here to help you out.
Congratulations, Crestvew's very own Dixie Dan Powell of Powell Injury Law, for your recent jury verdict of $11.5 million for your client from a death and injury against an inflatable amusement company. Recognized in 2017 as one of the top 100 civil trial lawyers in the state of Florida, and Dixie is AV preeminent rated. Dixie Dan Powell works tirelessly for his clients, as is evident by this extraordinary verdict. If you're taking your case to trial, be prepared. Contact Dixie Dan Powell and Powell Injury Law, 850-306-2667.
For the record, we're back. This is 21 CF 2144, State of Florida versus Mr. Norris. Mr. Williams is here with his client, Mr. Norris. Ms. Sandler, are you ready for the state?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead with your questions, please.
May I remain seated, Your Honor?
Yes, that's fine. Again, this is not a normal courtroom that we use for these types of things, so I want to make sure everyone's closer to the microphone more than standing up. So.
Your Honor, just for the record, the court needs that the state will endeavor to attempt to cover what the state needs to cover. There is an interview with Mr. Norris with law enforcement. The state did not plan to admit it into evidence, but may need to do so through their witness, but it is 3 hours and 20 minutes long. So the state did not plan to play it today, Your Honor.
Okay.
I did want to bring that up because it may come that we need to submit that to the court, and I don't have any objection to the court watching it on the court's own time rather than playing it.
Okay, y'all don't want to watch me watch the video, as I like to say. All right, so if that ultimately is the case, I mean, there's a good chance I'll take this case under advisement for at least until the end of the week when we have our next kind of jury review date. And just to kind of bring that up, because Ms. Sandler, I think we talked about the case briefly yesterday at docket day, but I think Ms. Leone was covering at the time. Do y'all expect this will be ready for trial for this cycle? If, I mean, obviously depending on what happens here.
We've had witness issues in the past. I think we're going to talk some more, but at this point, I don't see anything that's forcing a continuance.
Okay.
But we'll talk more, and we do work together very well and communicate well, and so you know, I don't anticipate problems.
Obviously, I just want to know if there's going to be, I'm not going to be the reason why this doesn't go to trial because I haven't made a decision on this part of it yet. But if I've got to watch 3 hours of a video, I won't be able to finish that today. By the time we get through testimony, I'll take everything under advisement, watch the video if it's admitted, and then have a ruling for you on Friday.
Thank you. I will see how the state's cross goes, and then I may admit the video for the court. Also, I believe the state sent an email yesterday that Friday I am scheduled to be in
Bay County, I believe.
County, which I looked at it. It is 1 hour and 51 minutes from the Bay County Courthouse to the Crestview Courthouse. And it is a sentencing on a drug manslaughter in which we do anticipate a lengthy victim impact statement that I cannot reschedule.
Well, I think we'll talk about it then some more as we go forward. Okay. My understanding as far as this trial period, I'm not trying to get into all these things with people who aren't here for this, but I believe I only have one other trial that's potentially set, and we've got a hearing on that on Thursday to see if that's even going. So I may have some days next week that we could potentially hear some motions if need be, so we don't have to try to force it all into Friday if that works for everybody.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
It'll be my preference as we get through these cycles that we're not doing these things relatively, I'm not saying at the last minute, but having these issues decided well in advance of trial so that y'all can formulate your strategies, witnesses, things like that change based on what these rulings are. So I'd rather get them done further in advance, excuse me. But we'll roll with the punches as we go.
Yes.
All right. Anything else that we want to talk about before we get started?
Nothing further from the
All right.
state.
Go ahead with your questions then, Ms. Sandler.
Thank you. Mr. Norris, were you still living with Tracy Smith before your Baker Act?
Yes, ma'am.
And you stated you've been together 25 years? And you testified earlier that you did not damage anything in the house. Am I correct in that? And just to be clear, you testified earlier that you called law enforcement when you first got back home from the Baker Act. Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, ma'am. Can I stop y'all for a second? I know this is sometimes what happens with these microphones is that we tend to lean past them, and Mr. Norris, you're doing that. I just want to make sure that your answers are coming up on the recording, so don't lean in too far, or if you do, just lean back before you give your answer. That way the microphone picks it up. All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, to the best of my knowledge. No, ma'am, not that I can tell.
Besides
I can't really see the angle of the china cabinet, but pretty much that's it.
All right, objections, Mr. Williams?
No objection.
All right, Exhibit A will be admitted without objection.
know that's Zane. He was standing. That's the front entryway of the door.
And is this during the
There again, this has been 3.5 years, but I would say yes, ma'am.
Okay, is it
Yes, ma'am.
okay? And the second time outside?
Pretty much, yes, ma'am. Vesper time.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That is the officers that came out.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And
No, ma'am.
all right, statement.
Objections, Mr. Williams?
No objection.
All right. B would be admitted without objection as well.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's before I removed her clothing that was scattered all over the place.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it a true?
Yes, ma'am.
And it doesn't?
No, ma'am.
All right.
There's no basis for an objection, Judge.
All right. C will be admitted as well without objection.
I'm not, what you're asking me, is that my level? Yes, ma'am. That's my level.
And does it have your name?
Yes, ma'am.
Um,
Yes, ma'am.
does that appear to be the kitchen and china?
Yes, ma'am. That is the china cabinet.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Would this appear to be
Possibly.
is that you in the corner in the dark?
Yes, ma'am. That is our initial walkthrough. That's when I first got home. That's the shirt and pants I had on from the hospital.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Does it appear to be
No, ma'am.
statement?
No objection.
All right. D would be admitted without objection.
Give those to the clerk.
Please. Thank you.
And Mr. Norris, we've discussed the Baker Act today. Do you believe that Ms. Smith's Baker Act was correct?
Ma'am.
Okay. Were you angry that you were Baker Acted?
Just shoveled, yes, ma'am. Not really angry, just a lot of not understanding why she done it or what was going on.
You believe the Baker Act was wrong?
I know it was wrong.
Did you tell law enforcement you were upset that you were Baker Acted?
Ma'am, I told him that if he took me out of there, I wouldn't have nothing left to my name when I got home.
Did you tell law enforcement in that first, and let me clarify. Let's talk about this in time order. The first interaction with law enforcement. Did you tell them that, and that was on August 25th, correct? That was the day you got home, August 25th?
Yes, ma'am.
And 2 law enforcement officers showed up,
Yes, ma'am.
and you talked to them, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that an under oath statement?
No, ma'am.
Okay, you were just speaking with law enforcement officers. And that was sometime in the afternoon?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember exactly what time?
Not exactly, no, ma'am.
Okay. But it was daylight,
Yes, ma'am.
and it was afternoon.
Yes, ma'am. It's probably 12:31, 2 o'clock.
Okay. Do you remember the officers' names? No, ma'am. All right. Did you tell those officers that Tracy had done all of the things to the house?
Yes, ma'am. I assumed initially that someone had broke in when I seen the door ajar, and I peeked in the bedroom in the back and seen the destruction and all. And that's when I backed out and went and called the officers. They come out and we did the walkthrough. We walked around in the yard. Once I seen the stuff around the burn pit that was mine, had been burnt, I assumed then it was her. That's not the first time she burnt my thing.
Did you tell the officers that you were scared of
Yes, ma'am.
Miss Smith? Did you also tell the officers that you were a black belt?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you tell them you weren't going to take this anymore?
Not in a violent way. I was going to be seeking terms for divorce, a way to get away from there. I done gave her every chance and opportunity.
Did the officers inform you that your home is community property?
Yes, ma'am.
Did the officers tell you that a wife can't burglarize her own house?
Yes, ma'am. They told me all of our belongings were community property also.
And then did the officers leave?
Yes, ma'am.
And at that point of time, Miss Smith was not at the house, correct? Did Miss Smith ever come into the house between the time you got home and the time the incident occurred in which Mr. McCombs was shot?
Not to my knowledge.
Were you at the house the entire time between the time the officers left the first time and the time Miss Smith entered the home?
Walked down to the neighbors and used the phone down at Jonathan's.
And when you say Jonathan, do you mean Jonathan Carr?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember approximately what time that was?
On over around 4:30 maybe.
Did you talk to Jonathan Carr?
I asked to use his phone.
Okay. And you said that was around 4:30 in the afternoon, give or take?
Yes, ma'am.
The day of the incident?
I had started cleaning on the house, cleaning the kitchen cabinets, countertops, and straightening things up, throwing all the broken debris and all out.
Now, when you went to go see Jonathan Carr, did you talk to him about being Baker acted?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you tell Jonathan Carr you were going to make the girls pay for what they did?
No, ma'am.
Did you go see anybody else that day besides Jonathan Carr?
Go to Joe and Jennifer's. Ed and Jennifer's, and use their phone to make the initial call to the first officers that came.
At Ed and Jennifer's, does Justin Ham live there?
No, ma'am.
Who are Ed and Jennifer?
They live behind the fire department, volunteer fire department, neighbors, straight across to the left from my property.
Do you know Justin Ham?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you see Justin Ham that day?
He was sitting on the porch when I went up to Jonathan.
Did you talk to Justin Ham about this, about your Baker Act?
I just asked him if he'd seen the girls,
And by
if Jonathan was home, and then went on inside.
girls, do you mean Tracy Smith and Rhea
Tracy
Ham?
and Rhea, yes, ma'am.
Were they the two people that had you Baker acted?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you make any threats to Rhea Ham or Tracy Smith to Brandon Ham? I believe he goes by Brandon.
Yes, ma'am. Me and him weren't that close. I was more close to his other brother, Brian.
Now, you testified earlier that you had no idea who was coming into your house. But right before that incident, Tracy Smith was outside, correct? Right before someone came into the house, Tracy Smith was outside. Is that correct? Okay.
Time frame you're speaking of?
Let me back up. So at some point in the evening, did Tracy Smith come to the area of the house?
her and Joe was forcing their way in. First time I'd seen her since I'd seen her out there at the road at the driveway when the officers were on their way.
Okay, so you saw her at the end of the driveway at some point in the evening?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
I
was it
was
still?
coming back- When I was coming back from Jonathan's using the phone, and I'd walked up on them.
Okay, and they were at the end of the driveway of your house?
Yes, ma'am. Out at
Okay.
the road.
And it was Tracy Smith and Ray Ham and Joseph McCombs.
Zane, Tyler Abel,
And that's your grandson?
step-grandson, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at that point, you said Joseph McCombs and you had a verbal interaction.
I just said to him that you're in the wrong, Joe.
And he said, I'm not?
He said, no, I'm in the right.
Did he make any threats towards you?
Body language and him being very stoic and not.
But did he say anything
No,
to
ma'am.
you?
He didn't say another word. That's the only words he said the whole time.
Did he make any threatening moves towards you?
Not at that point.
And it's your testimony today that he didn't say anything to you the rest of the evening. And was that about a half hour before the incident?
From the time the police officers got there and did their intake and left, it was probably an hour, probably transpired.
Between you seeing them at the end of the driveway and the incident?
Already getting dark.
So is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am, I'll say yes. I'm not, have a watch on or wasn't watching a clock.
So when you got back to the house after going to Mr. Carr's, is that when you spoke to Elliot Howard? I want to make sure I get a good timeline here.
Spoke to Tracy and Joe and seen them out at the end of the road, and Tracy gave me her verbiage that she did, and I told Joe he's in the wrong, and she said the law's on the way, and I just threw my hands up, said I guess they'll figure it out when they get here. They've been out here 3 times a day already. One more time's not going to hurt. I had called prior to even going home from the hospital and asked the law to go out there and make sure it was okay if I went home. They told me yes, it was fine.
Okay, but the only law enforcement that came out that day was the law enforcement when you called earlier in the day, around 12:30 or 1. And is that a yes?
I'm assuming the one that I called like 11 o'clock that morning had went out and did a welfare check, make sure it was okay that I went home. Then when I got home, 2 officers came out. They left. Then I cleaned up, was pilfering around, cleaning up, straightening up, throwing debris and all out of the house.
And then you had
Loaded out the
contact
back
with law
door.
enforcement officers again in the evening.
I didn't contact them, no ma'am.
But
She said she had called them and they're on the way.
okay, but you had contact with Elliot Howard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, in the evening.
It was on over around 5 o'clock maybe.
And at that point, you knew Tracy Smith, Joe McCombs, and Ray Ham were at the end of the driveway?
Yes, ma'am.
Right before you had contact with Elliot Howard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
She told me the law's on the way.
And your testimony today is Elliot Howard told you that he ordered them to leave?
He said, I'm making them leave. You're going to bed.
And your testimony today is it was approximately an hour between that interaction with Deputy Howard, and the time Tracy Smith came into the house?
Had to be a little longer than that because it was already getting dark and it was in summertime. The days are extended that time of year. So it was on over probably 8 o'clock or so before they even came, before Tracy and Joe tried to enter the home. Broke in on the home on me. It was good Vesper time.
And it's your testimony today that Officer Howard did not tell you that it was community property?
Property itself, as far as our belongings, he did iterate that.
He did say it was community property.
Belongings, yes, ma'am. That wasn't an issue at that point. I done accepted the fact that it's gone. There's nothing you can do about that.
And it's your testimony today that you did not destroy any of the property in the house yourself.
Other than tying the string to the china cabinet.
After the incident occurred, were you taken into custody by law enforcement? And you've been arrested for domestic violence before, haven't you?
Wasn't a touch or strike. I slapped the phone out of my face that she was harassing me with and had been harassing me hours and hours on that morning.
Well, my question was, you've been arrested for domestic
Yes,
violence
ma'am.
before. Is Tracy Smith your only arrest for domestic violence?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Have you ever had domestic violence injunctions with anybody but Tracy Smith? So you've never had a domestic violence injunction with your ex-wife, Crystal
Had an
Norris?
injunction, but it wasn't for domestic. It was through a divorce.
And have you had another injunction with a prior girlfriend to Tracy?
My knowledge.
And the case you just mentioned with the slapping the phone out of her hand, was that dismissed at Tracy's request, to the best of your knowledge? Did you go through a 90-day mental health program?
Drug rehab.
Okay.
I
So
I asked for it.
and was that in 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
So was that for methamphetamine usage?
No, ma'am.
What kind of drug?
On a prescription pain medication for my disability. I got tired of them because they were making me so sick, and they changed the formulary. My doctor had me on Xanax and Percocet. Changed the formulary to where you couldn't have those two combinations, so I gave up the Xanax, and it nearly killed me.
Okay,
And,
so
I
you
said,
went
I don't
through.
want the Percocet no more either.
Let me ask my question, please. So you went through a 90-day program for that domestic violence incident.
That was wasn't a violence. There wasn't no violence.
Okay, but
But
the
it
arrest was
touched
for
right-
domestic violence, was it not?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Charges were dropped.
But that was after you did the program. So Tracy did not ask for the charges to be dropped, as far as you know. Now, the evening of the incident, do you remember giving a statement to law enforcement that night? Okay. All right. And do you remember the officers that you gave a statement to?
Not by name.
Okay. If I told you one was by the name of Investigator Padilla, would that sound correct?
Yes, ma'am. That sounds
Okay. And the other one was by the name of Investigator Kruger, would that sound correct? Okay, but Padilla sounds familiar. I believe he is young, yes, sir. Do you remember where it was at?
H. Oldest station.
The
Or the
Okaloosa.
Highway Patrol, the old office.
Okay. Was that here in Crestview?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you remember about what time it was when you gave that statement?
Time had got away from it at that point. It was well dark.
Okay. So maybe after midnight? Okay, but it was still on the same evening?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you swear to tell the truth during that statement?
I was still in initial shock, and everything had gone on, a lot of emotions.
Do you remember how long you talked to officers?
I couldn't put a time. like blistered by at that point.
Was it quite a while?
We had a lengthy conversation, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you just said you swore to it. Did you swear to tell the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember talking to Investigator Padilla and him asking you about gun safety? Do you recall him doing that at all?
Seems vaguely.
Did you tell him that you're a backdoor gunsmith?
I do,
And did you tell him you know a lot about guns?
yes, ma'am.
Did you tell him that Tracy doesn't know much about guns?
No, sir. No, ma'am, I didn't tell him that. She don't know as much as I do, but she's very
So
good with a firearm.
you didn't say Tracy doesn't know much about guns.
Not as much as me.
And did you tell Investigator Padilla that you had no idea who was coming into your house?
So, hearing of the door being ripped, no, I wasn't certain who it was.
Did you tell Investigator Padilla that you saw that it was Joe and Tracy coming into the house?
After I came in the living room and seen them entering, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you knew it was Joe and Tracy coming into the house.
Not prior to. At the moment of them coming in and me confronting them, him holding the door and her squeezing through, I recognized her, and I pretty much assumed that it was him ripping the door open,
So,
and he walks right in after her.
so it's your testimony today that you saw them coming through the door. And you don't recall telling Investigator Padilla that you saw them after they had already entered.
I don't understand the question.
Okay.
They were not in the house when I first initially saw them. They were coming through the door.
And at that point, you had a gun in your hand.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when you saw that it was Tracy and Mr. McCombs, and I apologize, I keep saying Joe and Tracy. We get familiar with cases. But when you saw Miss Smith and Mr. McCombs, did you put the gun down?
Relaxed it down by my side, yes, ma'am. When I seen it was her, when he came in, I raised the barrel.
And when you talked to Investigator Padilla, do you remember telling him that you hadn't seen Joe in 20 years before this night?
I've run across him at the store or something a couple of times, but as far as having conversation or being aware of him being Tracy's cousin and all that, I had no knowledge of that.
Do you remember talking to Investigator Padilla that night and telling him that Joe told you, I'm just here to make sure Tracy is okay?
Joe did not say that.
And Joe didn't say anything like, I'm just here to make sure you don't lay hands on her?
No, ma'am, that was
You don't remember saying anything like that to Investigator Padilla?
never. She said that. Tracy said that. He's here for me. I said, well, he was not supposed to be here. He's trespassing. He needs to leave. I said that 3 more times inside the house while backing up away from them.
Did Tracy have a gun in her hand when she came in?
She didn't keep a gun in her hand. She kept it stuck in the back of her jeans behind her back.
But
Her
you didn't
daddy's
see
service
it.
pistol.
You did not see it when she came in, did
All
you?
that time.
And
But she always kept it on her.
did you tell Investigator Padilla that night that Tracy always kept a gun on her?
I think I did tell him that she pulled it on me a couple of times and stuck it in my face.
And didn't you tell Investigator Padilla that when she did that, you told her to pull the trigger, bitch? And didn't you tell Investigator Padilla?
I never
I'm
talked
sorry,
to
let
her.
me finish.
You didn't let me finish my question.
Hold on a second.
Judge, I'm going to object to the compound nature of the question.
Let's all just slow.
I'm sorry, I thought he said no and answered the question.
Okay, let me just stop everybody. You let her finish, she's gonna let you finish. We need to make a good record. so we can't talk over each other. If you've stopped your answer, don't start it back up again 30 seconds later just because you want to say more. You wait for the next question. Mr. Williams, your attorney's going to get another chance to ask you some questions later. All right, go ahead, Ms. Sandler.
Okay. And that night, didn't you tell Investigator Padilla about Tracy? I ain't scared of you. You're not the first person to put a gun to my face.
That comment, but I probably did say that. I've had guns stuck in my face before. Or she bloodied me up.
And you mentioned earlier that Tracy called you to check on you while you were at Fort Walton Beach Medical Center. And didn't you tell Investigator Padilla that night that you told Tracy, hell no, I'm not okay. You got me locked in a psych ward. I want a divorce, and you hung up on her? Now moving back to when when Miss Smith and Mr. McCombs came into the house, you said you relaxed the gun by your side when you saw that it was Miss Smith and Mr. McCombs. And you
I think it was her. He hadn't entered yet.
okay.
I
And
raised the barrel when he came in.
please let me finish my question.
I'm sorry.
When you saw that it was Mr. McCombs, you recognized him, right? You knew who he was. You knew at the time he was Tracy's cousin? Did you know he was related to her in any way?
We'd had several gatherings with family members. Joe was one of her family members. The Stillers were her family members, and the Denmans. They were people that had kind of tucked me in. And all of the time that I'd spent with them, I'd never even seen Tracy.
But you knew who Joe McCombs was?
Yes, ma'am. I'd worked with him on a construction with Robinson Construction.
And you didn't have a violent history with Mr. McCombs, correct?
Me?
Yes.
No, ma'am. No bad blood. I liked Joe. He was young, a little cocky, arrogant at times, but I really liked him. I just attributed that to his youth.
And when he came into the house, did you see any weapon in his hands when he came in?
Just his demeanor. He kind
Just
of blowed up when he come in the door, puffed himself up and started, I couldn't explain the body language is what I was reading.
But he didn't say anything to you? No. And he didn't make any threatening moves towards you?
Yes, ma'am, he did.
So he threw a punch?
No, he just kept walking towards me and me telling him not to, and to back up and to leave.
So he kept walking towards you?
Pursuing me, yes, ma'am.
Where was that at?
The time I met them at the front door when he came in, all the way back down into the hallway where I'd backed up to.
So it's your testimony that he backed you up into the hallway, basically?
Her and him.
And was she in front of him?
Yes, ma'am. She was right up in my face the whole time.
But he was silent?
Stoic. Like there was nothing there.
Do you remember talking to Investigator Padilla the night of the incident and telling him that you brought the gun out for fear factor?
I cocked it for the fear factor. I was afraid.
My question was, do you remember telling him that you brought the gun out for quote-unquote fear factor?
Like that.
So you just said you cocked it for fear factor. Is that correct?
I was afraid, yes, ma'am.
So did you point the gun at Tracy Smith's head? Did you point the gun at Mr. McCombs' head? When did you have the gun pointed towards Mr. McCombs?
Never actually pointed it. I didn't brandish it. I just raised the barrel.
So you raised the barrel and you cocked the gun?
Yes, ma'am. On the second time, I told him to leave my home and quit walking up on me. He's got to give me room. It's my understanding in rules of engagement, there has to be anywhere from 6 to 12 foot between you and an assailant before you're in a safe position to defend yourself.
And that evening, did you tell Investigator Padilla that you had no intent to shoot him? You were just trying to bluff him out of your house?
Bluff, no, but have control of the situation, yes, ma'am.
So you had the gun raised to Joe to try to get him out of your house?
I was hoping he would see that as if somebody puts a gun on me and I'm in another man's house and he tells me to leave, I'm going to take that advantage and leave.
So you had the gun pointed at Joe just because he wasn't leaving?
Pointed, no, ma'am. I had the barrel raised and I had it towards him for my protection because I felt like he was going to bomb rush me or jump me.
Even though he did not do anything threatening towards you?
I seen it as a threat, him being there.
But you knew who he was? He wasn't a stranger to you, correct?
20 years prior, what he'd done in those 20 years, I had no, other than what I'd heard about him being Baker acted for.
I'm not asking you what you heard. I'm asking about your interaction with him.
I had no interaction. I just knew him to be a violent person.
But you said you had no violent interaction with him. And now you're telling me he's a violent person?
Having violence on other people.
But you've never seen him be violent with anybody else, have you?
Heard of him going off in stores and stuff and having to be Baker acted because he was having violent episodes.
But you're also saying that you didn't even know he was Tracy's cousin.
No, I didn't.
Do you remember talking to Investigator Padilla and saying that it was dark, you weren't even looking to see if they were armed?
I don't remember, though. That's been 3.5 years ago. I don't remember the detail of the conversation. No, ma'am.
Do you remember talking to Investigator Padilla and saying, guns in my hand, that's my fear factor to get them out of my house?
Not exactly like that, no, ma'am. Like there again, it's been 3.5 years, and in the heat of the conversation that I was in, and the stress and all I was under, I'm not sure what was said.
Do you remember talking to, in the same date and time, to Investigator Kruger, that you made up your mind you weren't taking this anymore while you were in the hospital?
That was the getting the divorce, moving out, getting over with it, and going on, putting it behind me. That was in that context, yes, ma'am.
So it's your testimony today that you were afraid for your life in your house?
Yes, ma'am. Not just from that one incident, but from prior things with her. It got to where I was not even able to sleep and comfortably be in my home.
So your answer is yes?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it your testimony today that you never pointed the gun at Tracy?
No, ma'am, I didn't want Tracy harmed. I didn't want nobody harmed.
And is it your testimony today that you never pointed the gun at Mr. McComb's head?
I didn't actually point and brandish the gun like you're referring. I just raised the barrel for comfort for me and to let them know that.
You raised the barrel and you cocked the gun, correct?
Yes, ma'am. On the second time, I told him to quit walking up on me.
And isn't the first rule of gun safety never put your finger on the trigger unless you mean to use it?
had the gun set on safety. In my training and my knowledge of that gun, once you pull the hammer back and have your thumb on the hammer, that is safety. It doesn't fire unless you pull the trigger, or you can release the hammer and let it back into not firing mode.
But your testimony earlier was that the gun went off because your finger was on the trigger when he pulled it, correct?
Thumb was on the hammer and on the inside the trigger housing. When it got snatched forward, my thumb was pulled off the hammer and against the trigger.
So your testimony is that your thumb went off the hammer and onto the trigger?
Index finger.
Do you remember talking to Investigator Padilla that night and telling him that your finger was on the trigger, and when he snatched the gun, that's why it went off, because your finger was on the trigger?
Being exactly like that, but that was the only way you could comfortably hold that gun in one hand, was to have it gripped with my finger inside the trigger housing and my thumb on the hammer, with the hammer back. That's safety. If I'm in control of the gun, it doesn't fire unless I take my thumb off the hammer and pull the trigger. With somebody else engaging themselves into it and initiating a snatch on the gun, that's going to initiate the fire.
And your testimony earlier was that Mr. McCombs was behind Tracy?
Partially, yes, ma'am. His right hand.
His right hand was behind. And so your testimony today is he snatched the gun with his left hand.
No, ma'am.
How would he have snatched the gun with his right hand if it was behind
May I
Tracy?
show you? Could I stand up and show you?
So your testimony is he snatched the gun with his right hand?
Judge, he's asked that he be allowed to demonstrate what he's talking about.
Any issues, Ms. Sandlin?
Demonstrative at this point.
I think he's just talking about using his hands.
He can just, that's, okay. Okay.
I was just going to suggest that he demonstrate.
Okay. But I guess the problem is someone's got to hold it.
All right.
I'll show you how I was holding it. I had it like this. Down at my side like this. And when he kept walking up on me, I raised it like that. That's the only way you can hold it. And I had when he came up on me the second time, I cocked it like that and showed him me pulling the hammer back. That's the only way you could hold that gun comfortably with one hand inside the trigger housing. It's kind of awkward. This isn't exactly the same. I had a center mass on his chest.
The question that was originally
I'm seeing this much of him.
where is the
Tracy's
shot
right
back
here.
point?
Tracy's right here. I'm right there. Joe's like this. His hand come up behind her back like that and like that. I can't do it with these.
Paul talking to Investigator Padilla that evening and telling him that Joe grabbed the firearm with his left hand. His hand stayed behind. His right hand stayed behind Tracy's back. You recall making that statement to Investigator
I'm
Padilla?
sorry. I didn't hear the question.
Do you recall speaking to Investigator Padilla the night of the incident and telling him that Joe grabbed the firearm with his left hand and his right hand stayed behind Tracy's back?
No, ma'am, I never did say that. I can still see it in my mind. All I seen was his shoulder move because she's already in my face. I've directed my attention off of him for that split second. And we're face to face, me and her telling me he's going to put you out of here. And I looked at her and telling her he's not putting me in his hand. I seen his shoulder move and his hand come up and grab with his right hand.
Can I have a moment with co-counsel, Your Honor?
Yes.
Opposing counsel.
I don't have any other questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Okay. Redirect, Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir. Were the events of that night disturbing to you?
I wouldn't have had it go that way for nothing in the world. It's nothing that I intended, had any desire of. That's not where I wanted my life to be. And this certainly isn't where I want to be. I'm supposed to be retired and enjoying my life. Me and her were supposed to be vacationing and seeing the state parks of the United States, traveling and using Holt as our home base. Methamphetamine ruined my whole life.
Does that
Something I
affect
just
your...
couldn't pull her away from. And I still don't understand the draw and the
Objection
lure of it.
relevant, Your Honor.
Move on, Mr. Williams.
Does that affect your ability to recall which hand was used and things of that nature?
No, sir, I can still see it every night in my dreams. Every night when I lay down, I reenact it all in my mind. I wonder why.
Now, the body cam photos have a time and date stamp on them. The time that's stamped on them, could it be as much as 5 or 6 hours less than what's stamped on the photo, the actual time that it was taking place? Do you know what Zulu time is?
No, sir. I'm not real big on technology. I just learned how to text.
Okay. When you raised the gun up, when you saw Joe coming through the door, you'd indicated that you had it down by your side with Tracy, and then when Joe came in, why did you raise it up when Joe came through the door?
Let him know the seriousness of the situation and how I was afraid.
Why was it important for him to know the seriousness of the situation?
I didn't want him bum rushing me.
Were you afraid he was going to bum rush you?
Yes, sir.
When you made statements like you weren't going to take it anymore, things along those lines, were you talking about killing somebody?
No, sir.
What were you talking about?
I was done with the marriage, done with the whole trying to help and do, bending over backwards and giving in and letting go and trying to get back. And I was done with it, tired. Just wore slam out.
Did you
I'm real sorry it came to this. I really am.
Did you do your best to answer the officer's questions that night?
Yes, sir. I stayed in it way too long.
Were you
That
still
was my fault.
Were you still under the stress and excitement of what had happened?
Yes, sir. In shock.
I don't have any further questions.
You can take your seat, Mr. Norris.
At this point, Your Honor, the state just has argument that the defense has not presented a prima facie case.
Make sure he isn't providing anything else at this point. All right.
No, Judge, I'm not.
Okay. So, no other witnesses or evidence you plan on calling at this point, Mr. Williams?
Not at this point, no, sir.
Okay. All right. Argument then, Ms. Sandler, as to why you think they haven't met their burden of prima facie, and then, Mr. Williams, you'll get your chance to respond.
Oh, Your Honor, based on the plain language of the statute, which here in the state of Florida, we're really big on reading the plain language of the statute and following the law based on the plain language is in 776.012, the use or threatened use of force. A person is justified in using or threatening to use force, except deadly force against another when and to the extent that the person reasonably believes that such conduct is necessary to defend himself or herself against the other's imminent use of unlawful force. And the testimony here today, we've heard a lot about Tracy Smith, but Mr. Norris did not shoot Tracy Smith. He shot Joe McCombs. He claims that he hasn't seen Joe McCombs in 20 years. He just knows things that he's heard off the street, but there are no personal observations whatsoever. Joe McCombs made no threatening moves towards him. Joe McCombs, according to Mr. Norris, did not say anything to him at all that was threatening. He just came in the door with Tracy Smith, whom he was an invited guest of. Tracy Smith was in the home lawfully. Maybe Mr. Norris didn't like that she came in, but that's her house. So she was lawfully where she had a right to be. She was not lawfully ordered by law enforcement to leave because they can't. They can't order her to leave her own property, and they know it. So there was never an order to leave. There's never any testimony that there was an order to leave. She's perfectly well within her right to come into her own house. If he rigs the house up because he doesn't want somebody in there, she can still come in because that's her house. And she brought Joe McCombs with her as an invited guest. And the law is very clear that an invited guest has the same stand your ground rights as a resident does. And I believe that's in the state's response in State versus Garcia. And in that case, where it's very similar to this case, the court ruled that Mr. Garcia had the right to use stand your ground against the homeowner who was using excessive force on him. So in the state's opinion, even if Mr. McCombs did grab the gun, which the state does not concede in any way, he would be standing his ground against an unreasonable use of force on him, because when Mr. Norris saw who came in, he knew that it was Tracy Smith who had a right to be there. He'd already been told she cannot burglarize her own house, and he'd already been told this is community property. He knew, and he chose to bring the gun out and point it up anyhow. So he was actually committing an aggravated assault on Tracy Smith and Joseph McCombs when he came out with the gun and when he pointed it at Joseph McCombs. Now, he testifies that he didn't point it at Tracy Smith, but he did have the gun pointed up towards Joseph McCombs. That's uncontroverted at this point. For home protection for justifiable use of force, and that's Florida Statute 776-013, it has to be against another's imminent use of unlawful force. Again, Mr. McCombs, and there's been no testimony or evidence that there was any imminent use of unlawful force. What Mr. Norris perhaps speculates without something more is not enough to raise a prima facie case of stand your ground. It just simply isn't, because it has to be an imminent use of unlawful force, or in the process of unlawfully and forcibly entering, or having unlawfully and forcibly entered. And that's very, very important, because it has to be unlawful and forcible. Not just forcible because he rigged up something on the door in his mind. Legally unlawful and forcible, and it's simply not here. What Mr. Norris did was commit an aggravated assault on Joseph McCombs, and he completely loses the four prongs that have to be presented for a prima facie case. He loses that prong of must not be committing a crime at the time. He loses it because he's committing an aggravated assault on Joseph McCombs by pointing the gun at him, by pulling the hammer back, by having it up at Mr. McCombs. He's committing an aggravated assault. And Mr. McCombs hasn't done anything but simply stay there with Tracy Smith. That's it. He hasn't swung at him. He hasn't done anything for an imminent use of force. He just hasn't. So what's happening here is he's trying to use stand your ground without even having made the prima facie case. And the law is incredibly clear that he loses that prong because he was committing an offensive aggravated assault. So by that, he's just lost that prong, and there are four prongs that he has to have to even show a prima facie case. Because the state does want to make an incredibly clear record here. The four prongs are that the movement used deadly force, the movement reasonably believed deadly force was necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to himself or another. Movement used deadly force while resisting the victim's attempt to murder him, to commit a forcible felony on him, or commit a forcible felony on or in his dwelling, and was not engaged in criminal activity and was in a place where he had a right to be. That's Freeman v. State, 373 Southern 3rd at 1258. Those are the four prongs. So to even reach the prima facie, he's got to show those four prongs. Now, he obviously used deadly force. The second prong, reasonably believe deadly force was necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm. He cannot meet that prong. And that's because his belief has to be reasonable, which means there has to be some evidence that that belief is what a reasonable person would believe. We've got no act of violence. We've got no threat. We've got nothing. He's simply there. And that's imminent death or great bodily harm. There's nothing. There's no evidence to show that there would be imminent death or great bodily harm by merely being present. And I would even argue that prong 3, use deadly force while resisting the victim's attempt to murder him. There's no evidence of that. To commit a forcible felony on him, there's no evidence of that. Or commit a forcible felony on or in his dwelling, there's no evidence of that. And was not engaged in criminal activity and was in a place where he had a right to be. There is ample evidence he was committing an aggravated assault, as he showed the court himself with the demonstrative. A prima facie showing cannot be made by conclusory allegations. The closest thing that the state can kind of, as an example, use is there's a show that was popular in the 90s called South Park. And in that show, there's an episode where Uncle Jimbo takes the kids hunting. And there's animals just standing there, much like this case. They're just there. And Uncle Jimbo goes, "They're coming right for us," and he pulls the trigger. And because he said they're coming right for us, he gets the benefit of committing an illegal act. And that's what we have here. Well, he was coming right for me, but he wasn't. He wasn't making any threatening moves. He didn't even say anything, according to the defendant. Didn't even say anything. Just stood there with his cousin. And that's not enough to make a prima facie showing in the state's opinion, Your Honor, and in the law's opinion. In the opinions of the court, that is simply not enough. That's the state's argument that he has not made a prima facie showing based by the evidence that he's put on today.
All right, Mr. Williams.
Your Honor, here's the problem. The state doesn't take into account that the court has to look at the totality of the circumstances here. I realize this isn't a drug search case, but basically when you look at the statute and when you look at the cases that interpret the statute, even in any self-defense, the trier of fact has to look at the totality of the information known by the defendant. Keep in mind, the testimony was about this long relationship between the parties, the batteries back and forth, the threats that Tracy made, the stabbing, and most importantly, Tracy's comment that she's got, I think it was 11 people lined up to take him out, or words to that effect. And so he's had this incident where he's been Baker acted. She's tried to get him out of the house. He's been fighting with her over her drug use for who knows how long. She keeps threatening him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Their battery, he talks about how she bloodied him, and then there's the incident where she takes the unicorn and pokes it into his side and gets charged with stabbing. She says she's going to get him back. So he goes there, all right, he gets out because he's not subject to Baker Act. The doc examines him, finds no threat, orders him released. They do the paperwork, he gets out that afternoon, he starts trying to find a way home, he eventually makes it home, and he calls law enforcement first to see if it's okay for him to go home. Then when he gets there, he calls law enforcement, and they come out and, survey the area. Then she calls law enforcement, and they come out, and what's he told? He's told about community property. He admits that. I don't know where that's really relevant, but he's told about that, okay? And he's told, you're going to bed, and I'm sending them home, or I'm sending them away. And he even says, well, I'm okay if Tracy comes back up here, et cetera, et cetera. You know, and he's had a brief interaction with the group of them. There's a total of 4 of them. There's Rhea, Tracy, Joe, and Zane. And he tells Joe, well, you're in the wrong. And Joe just stands there and leans back. No, I'm in the right. Does he have a fight with him there? Does he pull a gun on him there? No. He does what he's supposed to. He just goes home. And he tells them, okay, well, when the cops get here, they'll straighten it out. The cops tell him, we're going to send them away. He secures the place as best he can. Ties fishing line around the whole thing. And he testified that Tracy, he doesn't think would be strong enough to open that it must have been Joe opening it. And that's consistent with what he's saying about Tracy coming through and somebody else holding the door, and then Joe's comes in. And that's why he feels like it's probably Joe holding the door. He set up this alarm so that he'll hear if somebody breaks in. He's initially not thinking it's them because they're supposed to be somewhere else. The cops said they were going to tell him to go somewhere else. And it's somebody, and you know, he's just thinking somebody's breaking in. Another one of the group of meth heads that's hanging around. He sees Tracy, and so he relaxes. But then Joe comes in. Joe, who's 20 years younger and has 100 pounds on him. And that's when he brings the gun back up, and he tells Joe to leave. And he testified 3 times he's backing off, or he's backing away, and he's telling Joe to stop coming forward. He's not required by law to ignore the entire history. He's not required by law to ignore the threats that have been made to him. He's not required to ignore the fact that Joe's bigger than him. He's not required to ignore the fact that he's heard other dangerous stuff about Joe. He's allowed to take all of that into account in deciding whether or not he needs to protect himself. The purpose of this statute is so that a homeowner doesn't have to wait until somebody pulls a gun if he's in his own house. In the old days, you pretty much still had to wait. You just didn't have to retreat. And the duty to retreat, honestly, when facing a gun is kind of silly because you're not going to outrun that bullet. You're just not. So, the Florida legislature gave Florida citizens more protection in their homes. They can assume if somebody uses force to get in, like yanking open a door that's been secured, in the context of all these threats, in the context of I've got 11 people that are going to come and blah, 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 and not have to assume, oh, well, everything's going to be fine here, you know? He keeps coming up on me, even though I'm backing away. At that point, Judge, looking at the totality, his fear was palpable, it was real, and it was reasonable under the circumstances. And it's our position that a reasonable person would feel, or would, in that same position, would say, you know, I need to protect myself. I need to show that the gun is there. I need to show that it's cocked. He's still not shooting at the guy. He's trying to just get the guy to leave. And he's also, and this is where what the officer says comes into play, whether that was a lawful order for the officer to give or not, they've been told by the cops they need to get out of here, and here they are yanking the door open and coming in. And she's hurt me before. She said she's going to hurt me again. And now she's got this, and she's going to bring somebody else to do it because she's not physically big enough. And now she's got this other fellow who's 20 years on me and 100 pounds on me, and that's what he's going to do. You know, we've made a prima facie case. Prima facie is a fairly low burden, and we've made a prima facie case.
My one question for you, Mr. Williams, in reviewing this, the 4 prongs of the Freeman case.
Yes, sir.
Based on the evidence that we've heard today, what is the forcible felony that was being committed?
Well, the forcible felony is one way to get a self-defense.
Okay.
All right? You can also be in fear of death and great bodily harm. Now, in my motion, I suggested that attempting to yank the gun out of his possession would be a forcible felony, and certainly burglary is a forcible felony. At the point that he's remaining in the structure with the intention to commit a crime, i.e., beat up Mr. Norris, after Mr. Norris has revoked the consent to be there, arguably he's committing a burglary because he's remaining in the structure with the intention to commit an offense. Yanking the gun away might also be. But it's our position you don't have to have both a threat and a forcible felony.
Anything else?
Excuse me, sir?
Anything else, Mr. Williams?
No, Your Honor.
Any response?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
There's been no evidence presented that there was an intent to commit an offense therein. Absolutely none. Characterizing Mr. McCombs' entry as a burglary is a mischaracterization of the law, because that's not the definition. Burglary has to be an unlawful and forcible entry or entry with an intent to commit an offense therein. There's been no evidence presented that there was an intent to commit an offense therein, and the trespass that's inherent in a burglary cannot be used as the offense. That's very clear in the law. So what a person, and this is where stand your ground and where the case law is moving, developing, and I think the prongs in Freeman show that when the legislature passed this law, and I say I mean the state, they realized that this law could be used like the episode of South Park. It's coming right for me, therefore I get to shoot, therefore it's going to be almost impossible for the state to prove any homicide. And then the court said, no, let's make the prongs like we have in Freeman. There's certain things you have to show for a prima facie case, because otherwise we become the Wild West, Your Honor, where, and we obviate the need for divorce attorneys anywhere, because anybody who's had an argument with their spouse gets to say, I get to pull a gun on my spouse and whoever they may bring in with them for safety. The moment they come in, because I'm angry, and I get to say that I'm in fear for my life. And that's not how the law works. There has to be, when you're raising 776.013, prongs, it has to be unlawful and forcible entry, imminent use of unlawful force. And even if you're just using justifiable use of force, you can't use deadly force when you reasonably believe such conduct is necessary. It says, except deadly force. Now, if he thought Joe McCombs was coming towards him, you don't get to put a gun in their face. That's just not how the law works. That's called an aggravated assault. And if he's committing an aggravated assault, guess what kicks back in according to the law? The duty to retreat. So, stand your ground. There's no way the defendant gets there in the law, Your Honor. And that's the state's argument.
Your Honor, since it's my motion, can I get the last word?
Sure.
Judge, the statute says the person who uses or threatens to use defensive force.
What statute are you referring to?
Section 776.013, paragraph 2 and 3.
Okay.
This was also discussed in Dorosset versus State. Both are cited in my motion. Knew or had reason to believe that an unlawful enforceable entry or unlawful enforceable act was occurring or had occurred. In order to make a prima facie case, we're not required to prove a burglary beyond a reasonable doubt, just that he knew or had reason to believe.
Well, this is my intent at this point, and I want to review the statute, not just the statutes, but the case law that's been provided. I reviewed some of it again before the hearing, but now that I've actually heard the evidence, I'd like to have a little bit of time to read both in conjunction with my notes as well as the case law. So I'll ask the parties what y'all feel. Do you want to somewhat take a lunch break at this point? I'm going to go do that. Because if I decide that they have been a prima facie case, I want to be kind of ready to go forward for the rest of the afternoon on resolving any other further testimony. I can't say if it's going to take me 10 minutes or 30 minutes or not, because I'm trying to digest an entire morning's worth of testimony that, although I've read the pleadings, it's not the same as actually judging what was said here today, as opposed to what I may remember from what someone put in the pleading. I have to make sure I'm differentiating those things as well.
Yes, sir.
So any comments on kind of the logistics of the day?
Your Honor,
I don't have anything else, but the state might. I don't know.
I'm just saying, if I come back and I say I think they've been a prima facie case, the state plans to put on more evidence, correct?
several witnesses, but we anticipate that we would go past 3 o'clock.
Okay. Well, the only thing I have at 3 o'clock shouldn't take very long at all. I'm not sure if there's anyone from y'all's office that's handling that. It's some sort of out-of-state subpoena issue.
Mr. Sprouse will be here for that.
Okay. I don't expect that to take a whole lot of time. So if we have to take a recess from this case to handle that and then jump right back into it, I just want to make sure I give sufficient time to take a look at this now that I've heard it all. I know y'all have been dealing with this case for 3+ years, but I've had it for about a week. So I want to be able to look at what the actual testimony was today, reread Garcia, Freeman, and I'm not sure how you pronounce that one, DeRosset. I know I looked at that one again yesterday, but just now knowing the facts, I want to make sure I'm interpreting the law based on the facts that I've heard.
Thank you, sir.
All right,
Thank
so
you,
do you want to take a break till about 1 o'clock?
Yes, sir.
All right, give you all a chance to grab a quick bite and get set up if we have to go forward.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you,
All right,
Judge.
we'll be in recess until 1 o'clock.